so we'll go ahead and start off. So we're excited again. So this is a little project we've been doing called Speaking from the Heart. And so we're bringing on amazing people such as yourself, we think have really incredible stories, just so people get an idea of, who we're working with out there, and how we're trying to, broaden our scopes and stuff like that. So Amanda, why don't you go ahead and just talk about at first, give a little bit about your backstory, why you decided to go into what you're doing now and why, you felt kind of passionate about this.
So I am a student at University of Florida. This is my second year in the program, and unlike when you're working on your doctorate for nurse practitioner school, like it's nursing practice, but instead of writing a dissertation or a thesis, we do a clinical project. So we take research and then want to make practice change. We want to do something with the research that's already there, not necessarily make new research. And so when you even apply to the program, they ask you, what are some ideas you have? And so the first thing that came to my mind was I would love to do something with long QT syndrome and screening in children for long QT syndrome. And because of a nephew and a family, we'll talk about that a little later, but it was super exciting to me. So I wasn't sure what it would lead to or how it would come about. But a couple of years ago, when I applied to the program, that was my goal that I had hoped. And so I had done a lot of research on it. And then it looked like it wasn't going to happen, honestly. Like it was because most of the research showed doing it in newborns, that's the best time actually to screen hearts is when newborns are about a month old. And when I had talked to my professors and written this 30-page research paper, they're like, yes, sorry, that sounds great, but I don't really know where you would do that or how it would do. So I had moved on. And then back in January, I started working at Nemours Children's Hospital as part of my clinical rotation. And I was introduced to Dr. Delani and said, hey, are you interested? Is this something? And he told me about what was happening in Brevard and Osceola, and that, yes, hey, I could work with him on a project. And then COVID happened and I was trying to reach Evan and he was out of country or something. Anyway, finally in March, Evan and I connected, and it turned out that what I was able to bring to the table and what they needed where we both were at was a perfect fit. And so I'm excited to join with them. He's amazing. Yeah.
So, okay, so you're in Lake County, correct? Or that's
I am.
Where you're from. Okay, so Lake County. So let's talk a little bit about your role before we dive into, why you wanted to get in.
Yeah, sorry.
So no, you're totally fine, because I do want to talk about, your background and stuff, but let's talk a little bit about your role. I mean, obviously you saw how hard it was to get, heart screenings mandated, not only, in Brevard County and Osceola. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you're doing now to try to make this happen all over, other counties?
Well, and that's kind of a side, because I'm working on the playbook, and we actually just moved back to Lake County in January. Like my husband grew up in this area and we had lived here, but we had moved down to Naples, Florida for the past 9 years. And so when we just moved back, and then all this has kind of come together, it found out that who we play for had already been working with Lake County. But like I said, my husband's been here for a long time. He moved up here to be a teacher at the high school. I have two sister-in-laws who are teachers, one in the middle school, one in an elementary school, and we have connections throughout the county. So as we've started, we talked to a local doctor who already has been doing heart screenings for 10 years. We have a few contacts that we're trying to make just locally to see if we can help this become something here. So I was excited to hear that Lake County was already like looking at it at all, much less, I'm like, oh, wow, they're on the board, somewhat. So hopefully they're going to jump on soon.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's something, we were kind of talking about. It's just how you already do have connections, with other doctors. And that's something we're always trying to do is, build connections and stuff, because it's all word of mouth, how important this is, what we're doing, because some people still don't understand. And so kind of leading into that, why don't you talk about your nephew and talk about what brought you to this understanding? I mean, you're basing your life around it now, what had brought you to this point that made you realize how important this cause was?
So, and I may get emotional here, but that's the way we are. That's why we do this. And so, I have a brother, and his wife and I were both pregnant at the same time. Mine with my second child, she was pregnant and I was with her. We were home over Christmas, found out they were having twins at the same time I was having, a single boy. So she was having 2 little boys, I was having one. And as they were born 6 days apart. And when they were both all 3 of the little boys, were turning 2, they all needed tubes in their ears. And so they were all struggling, talking and that kind of stuff. So ironically, within a month, all 3 of them had tubes put in. And, but before, Luke and Logan are my nephews. And before they had the tubes put in, my sister-in-law had said, hey, will you screen their hearts? Because my brother has a condition called long QT syndrome. They had discovered when he was in high school, somehow he had passed out, and his dad's an ER doctor. And so they had discovered this, and he was on medicine, and so doing okay. So she brought it up. Nobody even said anything. They didn't even pick this up. And so they checked it out, but then they never heard anything. They said, oh yeah, they're fine. They did their surgery, put him to sleep, did their surgery. Well, then about 8 months later, she was in Illinois, actually visiting her parents. She was there alone with the 2 boys, and Luke climbed up into her lap and started coughing. I think they had a little cold, and he arrested in her arms, sudden cardiac in her arms, had a heart attack. And thankfully her father was home, who, like I said, ER doctor for years, was able to come down and started CPR, but they didn't have a defibrillator. And it took 7 minutes for EMS to get to the house. And by that point he was gone. And so I got a call because my brother was is in the Air Force still. And he was not there. He was working. And so I got this call in the middle of the night and said, Luke's gone. He's like, I'm on an airplane. I'm trying to get back to him. They're life flighting him. They're trying to do something, but they couldn't. So he's as fast as he can getting there. They couldn't figure out what he was gone. They couldn't bring him back. And they ended up doing an autopsy. But because long QT syndrome is an arrhythmia of the heart, there's obviously no rhythms going on anymore because the heart is dead. And so they couldn't figure out what was going on. But because he had an identical twin, they were able to check Logan's heart. And from that discovered that it was long QT syndrome. And so Logan, and it turned out that his mom had it as well, that within like 3 weeks, they had defibrillators implanted because they said this could happen at any point to Logan because this just happened, and got him on medicines and all those kind of things. So now, I know. And so they came to find out later that the EKGs that had been done showed that they both had it, but they were not either properly read, or somewhere the communication didn't happen. There wasn't follow-up. They weren't, told about it. They didn't know. So even though it had been screened 9 months before, the follow-up and the standards, whatever it was, it didn't flag them and they weren't told. And so, yeah, so that was actually in 2006. And my sister-in-law and I both were pregnant at the time with our next boys who were born a couple of years apart. We were pregnant again at the same time. And her next son also has it. And then years later, she had a little girl who also has it. And they said, if they all, we're done, we're not doing this anymore. And they're all in medicine. But our boys now they just turned 17. They just had their birthdays a couple of weeks ago, Logan and my Gavin. And so, but yeah, I've always been passionate about it. And I said, I don't know why this is something, it can be treated. We can save these kids. They literally take a pill every day and they're able to live pretty much a normal life.
And that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, knowing an entire family now with it, I mean, is that just really the extent of how their life has changed? Obviously they're missing someone now, but as far as living with long QT, is that the extent of how their lives have changed? Just taking a pill every day, or do they have to make other changes in their diets, exercise, things like that? I mean, has the family to change a lot more?
I think at the beginning, because research has come a long way in the past 10 years, or 15 years since this happened. And so, like I said, they had defibrillators implanted, but then like 4 or 5 years later, they actually got to have them removed because the research had shown that their type, because they were genetically typed of what kind they have, there's a few different types of long QT syndrome. And so they didn't have to have the internal defibrillator anymore, that they can just take medications. They're still limited on some of their athletic activities, like they can't play soccer. They were all big soccer players and they can't do soccer anymore, but they've done a really good job of so they play tennis right now. They've done some other activities that are better and cleared with their heart that they're able to do. And the big thing is that my sister-in-law carries an AED with her everywhere.
Oh,
like there's always, yes. I don't know how many they own, but she has one in their car. She trains every teacher. Yes. She teaches every teacher, every coach, any place they are trained and of how to use the AED if ever the need should happen. And so.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, it is a lot, but at the end of the day, it's like, you'd rather know and make these changes than just go about living what you think is a normal life and have something tragic happen, as so many people do. And so, again, we went and we talked about, what you're doing with it previously. Why don't you talk about, I think the most interesting thing about this was that you were saying that the boys were screened and it was missed. Have you, during your schooling now, have you came across maybe this is how they missed it, or is this not a common thing for this to get missed?
Well, I think because with long QT, it seems like, hey, it would flag on the EKG. I don't know. I don't want to throw anybody under a bus. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what happened, or if they maybe did catch it, it was just the communication process didn't happen. But I think that's what it is, that there are, even some, most pediatricians, most people aren't in-depth readers of EKGs, and they're not able to necessarily read a sports EKG, because there are some natural things that happen on a sports EKG that you wouldn't, would be different, if, and even as a nurse practitioner, in my training and stuff, we know basics, but if I see something, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to call a cardiologist because I'm not the expert. I'm going to call somebody and ask them. And so I think that's the big difference, is just, you've got to have a specialist that's going to read it. And I know that's who we play for, thankfully we've got a group of pediatric cardiologists, but I think that's also some of the hang up is that people, just your everyday pediatrician or urgent care clinic or the people who do sports physicals don't know how to read an EKG. And so if they do it, but they're not sure how to read it, then there's a lot of liability there. There's a lot of fear there that, hey, maybe I missed it. And so I think having the infrastructure, that system in place, that we know it's going to be read by an expert who is going to pick it up, and that we know how to follow up, because that infrastructure underneath is what makes it possible. We know that if we do find something wrong, or if there is something wrong, we're going to see it first, and that we know how to follow it up, that there is something, a system in place to follow up.
Absolutely. And this might be, a really basic question, but based on all of that, how, as we were talking about earlier, you're working now to try to get heart screenings mandated in, other counties in Florida, and helping us kind of do that and work to figure out how to get the word out about this and stuff. Right. What would you say, I guess, to parents or a community where you're going in and you're trying to get them to realize how important heart screenings are? What would you say to those parents in that community about why they need to take heart screening seriously?
It's a good question. And I don't know if I'm the best PR person. Do you know what I mean? If I were just to talk, but it's just the we all see, I read something that actually Mr. Easton had written recently, that it's we feel horrible and we feel the tragic loss when we hear of somebody just dropping, this child that just drops dead on the basketball court or in the soccer field or football game or whatever. But wouldn't it be more fabulous that we could know that beforehand, that we've got kids walking around with a silent disease that is treatable, we can save their life, and it can be discovered simply. We can save their lives. There's no need for that tragedy, that trauma that hits. It's not just that one child, and it's not just their immediate family. It has huge ripples on their extended family and their community, and it's just heartbreaking, and it's scary. It scares every parent. What if that's my child? And so yeah, I think it's just like, hey, we screen for so many other things. That's what when I've done my research, because I've heard just recently, like 1 in 500, 1 in 300 kids, long QTs about 1 in 1,500 kids. And we screen for other things like cystic fibrosis, which is a horrible, awful disease, but those kids are going to live probably 40, 50 years, and they are going to be okay. But we screen for them, and it's like 1 in 3,000.
Right.
We screen every newborn for it. And I'm like, okay, this is way more common, and it's deadly, and it's treatable. And so I'm just like, come on, people, we can do this.
And it's, you think about it, because I don't know the one specifically, but there's other countries where they're already doing this. I mean, every single kid is getting a heart screening, whether it's during a physical or something else. And it's kind of mind blowing to think, because you always think, okay, well, we're in America, we're always ahead on this, that, and the other. This is one of the things we're way behind on.
We're missing the boat here. Yeah. So and that's what, when I was doing my research, Italy is one of those countries that since 2006, they've been screening every newborn. And I'm like, that was the year my nephew died. I'm like, and we're almost 15 years later, and we're still not doing it. And I know, because we are a free country, and I love American healthcare, and we have so many things. We're not socialized, so it's a different ball game. We allow people to be able to choose and see and support in that, but it comes with its own challenges that we're going to overcome. Yeah. But we do have the specialties, we do have the things, but yes, there's definitely room to grow here.
Definitely a lot of room to grow, a lot of challenges. I know we see them every day. I mean, it's so hard. It's just crazy to think, you have to go out and explain to people, don't you want to live? Like, don't you want to get your heart screened? It's just mind blowing sometimes when you really put it in perspective. But awesome. So, okay, we have just one last question for you, because I think this has been amazing. Don't want to keep you all night. I know you have boys waiting around. So the last question for you, our favorite thing to ask everybody is, who you play for. So, everybody has someone they do something for, what they're working for, who they're, putting their passion towards for and stuff. So we want to ask you, who do you play for?
Well, I play for Luke. I play for his siblings, Logan, Tyler, and Katie. And I play for every of these kids out there who we don't know who they are yet, but they are our kids, and we want to save all of them.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, okay. Awesome.